Auto Paint Expo, Volkswagen cut EV production, money in old batteries, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 0.956 seconds, Euro 7, FIA, hydrogen, Volkswagen software, solar EV charging. My name's Paul Callan and welcome to this week's MotorZen News. Auto Paint have a expo on the 18th of October, so if you're from the body repair industry, this is an event for you. It's on the 18th of October, it's a Wednesday night, it's from 4 in the afternoon to 9. All of their suppliers are coming to this event, so a very good technical evening for anybody who does anything in the body repair industry, and that's going to be held in the Pilo Hotel in Ashbourne, so 18th of October for that one. Last week we reported on how EV sales are up in Europe, but they're not up for everybody. And interestingly, one of the companies that they're not up for is Volkswagen. Volkswagen have announced that they're going to cut production in 2 German manufacturing plants. Basically what they're saying is the ID vehicle range sales are not hitting the numbers they expected, and in order to get the volumes of vehicles back in line, they're going to have to stop production for a couple of weeks during October. So 2 plants are going to be shut down for a couple of weeks. Added to this story is this suggestion from European countries, from the EU manufacturers now, that they want Europe to take a fight back against the low-priced Chinese EV vehicles. And what they're suggesting is that the full carbon impact of a Chinese vehicle needs to be factored into the cost of the vehicle, and that this is how they want Europe to go forward. What they're saying is that the electricity that powers the factory that builds the electric vehicle in China is fueled by coal, and this needs to be factored into the carbon footprint of the vehicle, and also the very fact that the vehicle goes on a ship and travels halfway around the world. This needs to be factored into the vehicle. So this is how European manufacturers want Europe to fight against the Chinese EV vehicle. And you can see, based on what's happening with Volkswagen, that this is getting pretty serious now for European manufacturers. A report from America is suggesting that recycling of EV batteries, it will be a very profitable activity. What they're saying is batteries that contain nickel, manganese and cobalt, that the value of those batteries could be something in the region of $10,000 per tonne. They're saying that lithium iron phosphate batteries could be something in the region of $4,000 per tonne. But the interesting thing about this story is, and it's a point I've been making to a lot of people, and it's not to say that I'm pro EV or anti-internal combustion, but the argument that some people put forward is that EVs are very damaging because you have to mine all the materials for the batteries. In this report, what they're already suggesting is that by the end of the decade, 11% of lithium, 11% of nickel and 44% of cobalt that goes into new EV batteries will come from old EV batteries. And what they're suggesting is that within the next 10 to 20 years, there'll be very little material required to make new EV batteries, because the majority of the material will come from existing old batteries that will be recycled. And this is an argument I've been making, that yes, we are in a period where we require lots of raw material to make these batteries, but somewhere down the line we'll go to a point where we don't need any more material or very little material to make these batteries. A group of students in a university in Switzerland have built an electric vehicle, but it's no ordinary electric vehicle. It's a race car electric vehicle, and it's no ordinary race car electric vehicle. It has to travel just over 12 meters, or that's what it does. It just travels over 12 meters. That's it. Okay? But what it does in that 12 meters is it goes from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 0.956 seconds. It's got the Guinness World Record for the fastest EV to 100 kilometers an hour. It beat the record that was previously held by a university in Stuttgart, and it beat it by 1.4 seconds. This vehicle has been built by the students, everything. They've built the printed circuits, they've built the batteries, they've built the chassis. There's hub drives on each wheel. They've built all of that. It's 140 kilos, and it's got output is something in the region of 326 horsepower. But the most interesting thing on this, and as I was reading up on this, I was saying, hold on a second here, your problem with this is, how do you get traction? They've also developed, and they've said very little about this, they developed a vacuum system that sucks it down to the surface. Now, we know Gordon Murray invented this type of concept years ago in F1 and it was banned. But we know that there's no problem to get downforce at speed, i.e. that's how all F1 cars work, is the force that's coming down as a result of the wings at speed. But the problem would be, how do you manage to get downforce in effectively under a second? Because that's what they needed. They needed in under a second, they need this downforce. So they developed a vacuum system that pulls it down in order to give it the traction as well. So we've got a little bit of footage on this, and it's really interesting to watch, and it's a really interesting concept, and interesting to say that these students built everything. So quite an achievement indeed. Within Europe, they are putting the final touches to the Euro 7 regulations for 2025. Interesting thing about this is it looks like the European Union of Ministers has listened to manufacturers. Manufacturers have said that the outline that was being laid down by the EU for the targets, that if they were to try and meet those targets, they said it would be very, very costly, it would produce very, very little environmental gain, it would make small internal combustions unaffordable. The amount of money it would take to put the emissions devices in the engine would mean the engine would not be affordable. They've also said that if you make us do this, it will divert funds away from EV development. So what the European Union have come back and said is that there's going to be no change to the Euro 7 regulations over Euro 6. So petrol and diesel cars and vans simply have to maintain the Euro 6 standards. Trucks and buses are being asked to meet new limits, but then there's also limits for particulates of brakes and tyres. So Euro 7 regulations will have limits for particulates on brakes, brake particulates and tyre particulates. So how that's going to be measured or gauged is going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. But that looks to be that there's general agreement now as to the way Euro 7 Euro 7 regulation is going to mean. FIA, the governing body over motorsport in Europe, have come up with a set of safety regulations for hydrogen-powered vehicles. And on the back of that, they've said that they want to have a championship by 2025 for off-road SUVs powered by hydrogen. Sustainable power sources is a key objective of the FIA. That's the statement they're coming out with now. And we know that as a result of, for 2026, Formula One is going to be using e-fuel. So this whole drive towards sustainable fuels is really starting to pace up within the FIA, and we're seeing this activity in every segment of motorsport. Volkswagen, we know, have been plagued with software issues on a lot of their new EVs on their ID range. And you know, what's really interesting is when you look at this, it seems to be what happened was that the software people, or the people that Volkswagen used on the software project, were, the wording that was used was industry veterans. So my interpretation of that was they were old timers within the industry. Well, what Volkswagen have had to do is that they've had to go out and hire a guy called Sanjeev Lal, who's got 25 years experience in software. He worked for Rivian, he worked for Tesla, he worked for Google. And what they're discovering now is that if you're going to build a software division, you need software people who've come from the tech industry. And it seems to be a fundamental mistake was made by Volkswagen in this whole area, was that they didn't recruit people from the tech industry, they recruited people from the automotive industry, old timers within the industry. And that appears to be where these problems have been, that they just didn't have tech people in the right roles, and now they finally had to go out, and one guy is the guy they've gone to get to try and solve these problems that they have with their ID range. The German government offered a subsidy for anybody who uses an electric vehicle. The subsidy would allow them to get access to funding to put solar panels on their houses in order to charge their electric cars. The subsidy was 300 million euros, and within 24 hours it was gone. Within 24 hours they had 33,000 applications. Something in the region of 10,200 euros per car owner. But all the other big incentive for this. And again, it shows you the way maybe your average consumer is really starting to come on board with EVs. They reckon that if these houses are equipped with these solar panels, it will reduce the cost of charging their electric vehicles by 1/3. So really, you can see the dots have been joined up now with this EV stuff as well. And yes, the argument was they're too expensive, you know, all these arguments against it. But when you see these type of offers being made now, and the idea that, yeah, effectively you could run your electric car partially by the solar energy that's been produced from your own building, it really is starting to make the EV thing start to make some form of sense as we see these things start to evolve. That's it for this week. Just keep in mind, anybody to do with the body repair industry, that auto paint event is taking place in Ashbourne on the 18th of October, 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. It's a Wednesday, and it's at the Pillow Hotel in Ashbourne. That's it for this week. Again, if you could, please, anybody you know in the trade or the industry, if you could share with them, like, comment and subscribe. Any little bit of support will be appreciated. And thanks a lot, and see you next week.